We got the builders in at our house, and what's dawned on me, and it dawns on me every time we ever get any tradesman in to do any work at our house, is that having worked in Formula One for so many years now, my standards, my expectations of workmanship and attention to detail are up at a level that most people, the real world, just don't work to. And I'm just forever frustrated by the fact that these guys they're all good guys, they're all doing a great job, they're good builders, but they work to real world standards, they don't work to Formula One standards. And unfortunately that's what's now ingrained in me over the years. It's what I've come to expect of everybody else. This is a problem that Formula One teams even have, when they have to start subcontracting work out. Most of the big teams don't do it anymore, but certainly lots of the smaller teams have no choice but to sub out some of the manufacturing jobs, and they want things doing to the levels and the standards that they do things to. The real world can't manage that, certainly not within the timescales that Formula One demands, and basically that's what I'm finding now with these builders. And my wife's pretty much the same as me now, probably having lived with me for so long. That's what's going on in my world at the moment. Because the builders are in, the heating's off, the house is absolutely freezing and in a complete mess with dust and dirt, rubbish everywhere. It's becoming a pretty difficult place to live, and I just can't wait for it all to be over. They've only been in there 3 days. So anyway, here I am back out on another dog walk. Actually, it's bloody freezing out here today as well. Now, there was lots of response to yesterday's vlog about McLaren's troubles. So thank you, first of all, for all the response, all the interaction on it. That's great. Lots of people, I think, misinterpreting slightly what I was saying. So I just wanted to clear that up. I'm not saying for 1 second that we should be blaming Renault for all of McLaren's problems. Absolutely not. I think some clearly have been Renault's issues, like the battery issues that stopped them and Red Bull. But McLaren have got to up their game a little bit. They're making too many mistakes. They've had too many issues that just should not have even been issues. And that falls firmly at the feet of McLaren. So definitely I'm not saying that they are blameless in any of this. They need to get it together, but this has to be a partnership. McLaren and Renault need to work together, which I think they are doing. Everybody I speak to within the team says that yes, it's far from ideal, of course it is, that's obvious, but there are positive signs. The big difference this year is that with McLaren and Honda, there was no dangling carrot, that there was light at the end of the tunnel. There were promises from Honda that were just never ever delivered upon. With the Renault power unit, there is a dangling carrot. It's won races before. Red Bull have proven that this can be a class-leading package, a class-leading relationship and a class-leading power unit. That's now in the back of McLaren, and that is something that's giving everybody at the team an enormous amount of hope. And as soon as they get these niggling issues sorted out, I fully expect them to be back delivering in performances that are worthy of a top team, which I still think McLaren should be classed as. Anyway, that's that hopefully put to bed. Let's hope they've got a better day, have a better day today, and really start to kick on. When you work in Formula One and you travel so much, you're away from home as much as we are, even more so for the teams who are away a hell of a lot, of course, doing every single race, every test. And when they come back, they're often working all hours when they're in the factory as well, some of them. Hugely demanding job and career to have. Very rewarding, of course, but hugely demanding. One of the things about all that is when you get to the off-season, that little gap between December and now, February, you kind of slip back into normal life. And it's wonderful. I've really enjoyed the last couple of months, being at home, being able to do the normal things like take the dog for a walk every day, like going to take the kids to school each day and pick them up again. And last night, I was very fortunate. We all went, the whole family went to watch my eldest daughter in a performance of Les Mis, and she had a lead role. She was up on the stage, singing and performing, and did an incredible job. I'm not ashamed to say that I cried my little eyes out watching her. But those things are all the things that you kind of take for granted when you are, when you live in the real world, if you want to call it that. If you have a, what you might call a sort of normal job. And these are the kinds of things that I'm certainly not moaning about working Formula One. I never would. I absolutely love what I do. You'll rarely ever hear me moaning or complaining about my job or career. But it's just an interesting insight into the way that life is for those of us who travel so much, is that you kind of end up having to miss the things that most people take for granted, like those kind of things, like your friends inviting you around for barbecues at the weekend. They stop inviting you because they know the answer is going to be no because you're going to be away. So this period of time in the off-season is really important for spending quality, valuable time with family and with friends, and just kind of doing the things that most people do every weekend. It's also a time when, I don't know if it's the same for everybody here, but my wife comes up with a job list that's incredibly long, that's built up between March and December, and when I get back in December, that job list has to be worked through. We started to see yesterday at the test the first signs of teams really pushing the performance limits, the performance window. Red Bull obviously delivered a stunning lap with Daniel Ricciardo, an unofficial lap record around that track, which is great. Mercedes not too far behind. Ferrari had a difficult day yesterday, but we have seen enough from their car already to suggest that it will be up there and definitely within the in the fight. The very early signs to me look like the Ferrari has a bit like it had last year, I guess, a slightly better car across the entire tyre range, whereas Mercedes last year were a little bit peaky when it came to tyres. They worked better on certain tyres than others. A caveat, I guess, to all of that is that Barcelona, whereas it's normally a really good benchmark for tyre testing, it's been completely resurfaced. It's a very smooth, much less abrasive surface than the teams have traditionally been used to, and we're seeing hardly any difference between the different tyre compounds in terms of performance. And that's something that I think is confusing a lot of teams, confusing even Pirelli perhaps, and something that I suspect will be different when we get to other tracks. But at the moment, the standout three teams are Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull. There were some really positive signs from the Renault factory team yesterday in that they did, I think it was 190 laps around Barcelona, which is a record. Previously, I think Mercedes last year clocked up 185 laps in a day, which was the previous record. And they've beaten that, 190 laps, which is incredibly impressive. That's a huge amount of data collection, a huge amount of learning. That is multiple race distances, which is exactly that's the situation you need to be in before you get to Australia. You need to know that your car and everything on it has completed many, many race distances already, so that you're not going into Australia with it being the first time that it's going to be put through the mileage and the demands that a race weekend will throw at you. Teams actually go through what they call a full race weekend simulation during testing. We used to do it all the time, where you simulate an entire race weekend through the practice sessions, through qualifying, the various rebuilds that go on in between, and then you go through an entire race day. They'll do a sort of dummy or pretend run to the grid. They'll warm the car up in the garage, send the car out, do a sort of a pretend lap to the grid. They'll come back into the pit lane, maybe do a race start at the end of the pit lane, and then go into a full race simulation, including pit stops, so that everything goes through exactly what it will go through when they do it for real. The big plus for Renault and the Renault customer teams in Red Bull and McLaren this year is that there are three teams who are really going to be pushing the boundaries of that power unit. That massively increases the learning capacity for that manufacturer. If you think about Honda last year, all they had was McLaren, and the thing kept breaking down, it wouldn't go very far. Learning anything, and certainly developing anything, was just incredibly difficult because they spent the whole year in fact the last few years, just constantly fighting fires, having to turn the power unit down just to get it through a race weekend or a qualifying session. That doesn't help anybody. What they have now, of course, is the Renault factory team, who are really stepping up their game. They've brought in lots more people to their factory, they're improving the facilities. They're a team that's really committing to Formula One on a long-term scale and putting the resources into that. And of course last year it felt like a little bit like a real sort of tough development year for Renault, whereas they were pretty late to the party, and it was Red Bull that were doing most of their important development, and certainly ones that were pushing the limits, I guess. Now of course we've got the Renault team doing that as well as Red Bull, and I fully expect McLaren to be doing that very, very quickly as well. So signs looking good for the Renault customer teams. They may well be the third best engine as we start this season, but I suspect by the end of it things might have closed up dramatically. Something else that lots of people were rightly quick to point out after yesterday's vlog was the fact that I didn't really mention the Honda Toro Rosso relationship, which is equally as new as the McLaren Renault relationship. It's absolutely true. And at the moment, the early signs are that Toro Rosso and Honda at least have something that's working and is reliable enough to get them round a decent sort of haul of laps each day, which is great. The performance, perhaps not quite there yet, but that's fine. They've got a good base point to start from. One thing that seems to be becoming apparent, though, from Barcelona is that there are lots of rumours, lots of talk around the paddock, and I think this is true, that Honda have been fitting a new power unit every single evening into the car. What does that tell us? Well, it could be that they're trying to cycle through lots of units, desperately looking to get mileage onto units and get the old ones out so they can strip them down and inspect them at various stages of their life. Could well be that. Or could it be that they still don't have a power unit that's reliable enough to go through multiple race distances yet, and they're trying to avoid the embarrassment of doing that in public? Who knows? When it's running, and let's say it's been running a lot more than the McLaren Honda did this time last year, has been looking reasonably impressive for a first outing. I'd love to know what you think of the current tyre situation in Formula One. We've obviously got an extra 2 dry compounds, dry tyre options for 2018 with the hyper soft and the super hard. I think some of you know my feelings on this already because I've mentioned it quite a lot, but personally I think it's too many options for the teams. And also, what do you think about the naming of them? If we want to make Formula One accessible and understandable, are these names of these tyres too confusing? Because does somebody who stumbles across Formula One know that a hyper soft is softer than an ultra soft? How would they be able to know that? Why would they know that a pink tyre is softer than a purple tyre, or vice versa? Should we not be giving them names like soft, softer and softest, or hard, harder and hardest? I mean, you know, that may sound simple, but isn't that what we want? Something that's pretty intuitive for people who are just stumbling across the sport? Let me know what you think on that. I'd love that to be a discussion. I am going to do a video on tyres, what the process is in choosing the tyres, how Pirelli choose their tyres, the tyre regulations for this year. I mean, I'm going to try and do a comprehensive video on all of that. But in the meantime, please do let me know what you think of F1's current tyre situation. Have we just gone a bit too far? Anyway, that's it for now. I need to get back and keep these builders in check. So let me know what you think. Please like the video if you have. Do share it around. I do appreciate everybody who shares these videos, because spreading the word is how we're going to get the channel to grow. And the bigger it grows, the bigger a community we have, the more interaction we have, and hopefully the better and more informative the whole thing will be in the end. So thank you for that. Do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will see you next time.